A Werewolf Shifter Romance. Written by Amelia Hart. Chapter 1. Wolves at Dawn. The mist clung to the earth as Freya made her way through the forest path, her breath forming small clouds in the cold morning air. Dawn had barely touched the sky, painting it in shades of deep purple and gray. She pulled her woolen cloak tighter around her shoulders, feeling the weight of 10 years pressing against her chest. 10 years. A decade since her father had fallen. The village of Thornmere still slept behind her, smoke rising from chimneys in lazy spirals. Freya preferred it this way, visiting the burial ground when no one else stirred. Grief was a private thing, not meant to be performed for curious eyes or pitying whispers. Her boots crunched against frost-covered leaves as she walked deeper into the woods. The burial ground lay nestled among ancient oaks, a sacred place where the pack had laid their honored dead for generations. Her father's grave sat at the edge, marked by a simple stone carved with his name. Garrick of Thornmere. Warrior. Father. Freya's fingers traced the leather pouch at her belt, filled with dried wildflowers she'd preserved through the autumn. Her father had loved the colors of late summer, the golds and purples that reminded him of her mother's eyes. She'd been gone 5 years now, joining him in whatever realm waited beyond this one. The trees opened up to reveal the clearing, and Freya's steps faltered. 20 massive wolves sat in a perfect circle around her father's tombstone. Her heart lurched against her ribs. These weren't ordinary wolves. Even from this distance, she could see they were enormous, each easily the size of a small horse. Their fur gleamed pure white in the early morning light, pristine as fresh snow. Freya's wolf stirred within her, awakening from its usual dormant state. The sensation sent tingles across her skin, a warning and recognition all at once. These were shifters, powerful ones. She should run. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, to flee before they noticed her presence, but her feet remained rooted to the ground, her gaze locked on the scene before her. The largest wolf sat directly in front of the tombstone. It was bigger than the others, its presence commanding even in stillness. As if sensing her stare, its head turned. Golden eyes met hers across the clearing. Freya's breath caught. Those eyes held an intelligence that transcended animal instinct. They pinned her in place, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. The wolf rose, and the others followed in perfect synchronization. Their movements held a grace that spoke of discipline and training. Warriors, she realized. These were trained warriors in their wolf forms. The largest wolf padded forward, breaking from the circle. Each step was deliberate, measured. It approached the tombstone and lowered its massive head. In its jaws, it held something that caught the weak morning light. Metal. A sword. Freya watched, transfixed, as the white wolf placed the weapon carefully at the base of her father's grave. The blade was ancient, she could tell even from this distance. The craftsmanship spoke of old magic, of a time when such weapons were gifts exchanged between great leaders. The wolf lifted its head, meeting her eyes once more. For a heartbeat, something passed between them. Not words, but a weight. An acknowledgement. Then the creature turned, powerful muscles rippling beneath pristine fur. As one, all 20 wolves moved. They flowed through the trees, disappearing into the shadows as silently as morning mist burning away under sunlight. Freya stood frozen, her heart hammering so loudly, she was certain the entire forest could hear it. Minutes passed before she dared to move, before she trusted her legs to carry her forward. The clearing felt different now, charged with energy that raised the hair on her arms. She approached her father's grave slowly, half expecting the wolves to return. But only silence greeted her, broken by the distant call of early birds. The sword lay precisely where the white wolf had placed it. Freya knelt, her fingers hovering above the blade. Power hummed beneath its surface, old and deep. The hilt was wrapped in worn leather, the pommel marked with a symbol she didn't recognize. A crown surrounded by thorns. Why would shifters leave a weapon at her father's grave? What connection had existed between Garrick and whoever commanded those white wolves? Her father had been a warrior, yes, respected within their small pack, but he'd been no one of great importance, no alpha or beta, just a good man who died protecting their borders from rogue attacks, or so she'd always been told. Freya's fingers closed around the hilt, The moment she touched it, warmth spread through her palm. Her wolf surged forward, more alert than it had been in months. The sensation startled her enough that she nearly dropped the blade. "What were you involved in, Father?" she whispered to the stone. The forest offered no answers. With trembling hands, Freya wrapped the sword in her cloak, concealing it from view. Whatever this meant, whoever those white wolves served, she needed to understand. But not here. Not in the open where anyone might see. The walk back to Thornmere felt longer than usual. Freya kept to the shadows of the forest path, hyper-aware of every sound. The sword's weight against her side was both comforting and terrifying. The village was stirring when she reached the outskirts. Smoke rose thicker now from chimneys. The blacksmith's hammer had already begun its rhythmic clanging. Freya pulled her hood lower and hurried toward the small cottage she shared with her younger sister. Bryn was awake, sitting by the fire with a bowl of porridge. At 16, she was growing into her wolf, the changes making her restless and hungry at odd hours. Her auburn hair, so similar to Freya's own, was sleep-mussed and tangled. "You went to see him," Bryn said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." Freya unwrapped the sword carefully, laying it on their worn wooden table. Bryn's eyes widened. She stood so quickly her bowl nearly toppled. "Where did you get that?" "It was left at Father's grave, by wolves." Freya met her sister's shocked stare. 20 white wolves, Bryn. I've never seen anything like them. White? Bryn's voice dropped to a whisper. She moved closer to the blade, her fingers reaching out but not quite touching. "That's impossible. There are no packs with white wolves anywhere near Thornmere." "I know." "Then who?" Bryn's question cut off as heavy footsteps sounded outside. Both sisters froze. A fist pounded against their door, hard and authoritative. "Open, by order of the Alpha King's guard." Freya's blood turned to ice. She threw her cloak over the sword just as Bryn moved to the door. 3 soldiers stood on their threshold, wearing the dark leather armor marked with that same symbol she'd seen on the sword's pommel. A crown surrounded by thorns. The lead soldier's eyes swept their small home. "We seek information about Garrick of Thornmere. Are you his kin?" "We're his daughters," Freya said, stepping forward. Her mind raced. Had they seen her at the burial ground? Did they know about the sword? The Alpha King requires knowledge of all warriors who served 10 years past. "Your father's name appears in our records." The soldier's expression revealed nothing. "What can you tell us of his service? Any alliances he held? Messages he might have left?" "He was a border guard," Freya replied carefully. "He died defending Thornmere from rogues. That's all we know." The soldier studied her for a long moment. "If you remember anything else, report to the garrison." His gaze lingered on the table where her cloak concealed the sword's outline. Anything at all. They left without another word, but Freya felt their suspicion hanging in the air. Bryn closed the door and leaned against it, her face pale. "They know something." "Freya, what's happening?" "I don't know." Freya pulled the cloak away, revealing the sword once more. "But I think Father was involved in something far bigger than we ever realized." Chapter 2. Blood and Recognition. 3 days passed since the soldier's visit. 3 days of Freya watching the forest edge from her cottage window, expecting either white wolves or armed guards to return. Neither came. The sword remained hidden beneath loose floorboards, wrapped in oiled cloth. She'd examined it a dozen times, tracing the crown and thorns etched into the pommel, feeling the dormant power that seemed to pulse beneath the metal. Each time she touched it, her wolf stirred with an urgency she couldn't explain. "You're going to wear a path in the floor," Bryn said from her place by the hearth. She was mending one of Freya's cloaks, her needle moving with the restless energy of a young shifter still learning to control heightened senses. "If you're so worried, why not ask the Pack Alpha what he knows? Because drawing more attention to us is the last thing we need." Freya finally turned from the window. "I need to gather more feverfew and willow bark anyway. The tanner's wife is close to her time, and her pains have been worse than usual." Bryn's needle paused. "You're going into the forest? After what happened with those soldiers? The herbs don't grow in our garden, and people depend on my remedies." Freya collected her gathering basket and the small knife she used for cutting roots. Her father had taught her which plants healed and which killed, knowledge passed down through his mother's line. Once, when fever nearly took Bryn, Mother had pressed Freya's palm to the girl's brow and whispered, "Some healers carry light in their blood. When it answers, don't be afraid. It was one of the few things she had left of him beyond memories and unanswered questions. Then I'm coming with you. No. Freya's tone left no room for argument. Someone needs to stay here. If the soldiers return, tell them I'm attending to a birth in the next village. Don't mention the forest. Bryn's jaw set in that stubborn way that reminded Freya painfully of their father. But she nodded, recognizing the weight of responsibility in her sister's voice. The morning had warmed by the time Freya reached the deeper woods. Sunlight filtered through the canopy in golden shafts, illuminating patches of moss and the first autumn mushrooms. She knew these paths as well as the lines of her own palm, had walked them since childhood collecting plants for her mother's healing work. The feverfew grew near the old oak, its white flowers bright against dark leaves. Freya knelt, murmuring a quiet thanks to the earth as she cut the stems. Her mother had taught her that too, respect for the plants that gave their essence for healing. She'd nearly filled her basket when her wolf suddenly went rigid inside her. The forest had gone silent. No birds sang, no insects buzzed. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Freya's hand moved to the knife at her belt as she slowly stood. Her senses expanded, reaching for any hint of danger. Then she caught the scent. Wolf. Multiple wolves. But wrong somehow. Wild and acrid, touched with something that made her stomach turn. Rogues. They emerged from the underbrush, 4 of them in wolf form. Their fur was matted and scarred, their eyes holding a manic gleam that spoke of shifters who'd spent too long away from pack structure. Without an alpha's influence, some wolves lost themselves to their beasts, becoming more animal than man. The largest rogue, a gray wolf with half an ear missing, growled low. The others fanned out, cutting off her escape routes with the coordination of practiced hunters. Freya's heart hammered against her ribs, but she forced herself to remain still. Running would trigger their chase instincts. Her only chance was to hold her ground, to let them see she wasn't easy prey. I have nothing worth taking, she said, keeping her voice steady. Rogues in wolf form couldn't respond with words, but some part of their human consciousness remained. Leave now, and there's no need for bloodshed. The gray rogue's lips pulled back, revealing fangs stained with old blood. He took a step forward. Freya's fingers tightened on her knife. Against 4 wolves, the weapon would be useless, but she'd be damned if she went down without a fight. Her own wolf surged forward, demanding to be released, but her shift was slow. Always had been. She wouldn't complete the transformation before they reached her. The gray rogue lunged. A massive white shape slammed into him from the side with such force that both wolves tumbled across the forest floor in a tangle of fur and fangs. The new wolf was enormous, easily twice the size of the rogue, its pristine coat gleaming like fresh snow. One of the white wolves from her father's grave. The other 3 rogues hesitated, caught between fleeing and defending their leader. That hesitation cost them. The white wolf's jaws closed around the gray rogue's throat. There was no struggle, no drawn-out fight, just brutal, efficient violence that ended with the gray rogue's body going limp. The remaining rogues scattered, crashing through the underbrush in their panic. The white wolf didn't pursue. It turned to face Freya, blood staining its muzzle, those golden eyes locking onto hers. Power radiated from the creature in waves that made Freya's knees weak. This wasn't just any shifter. This was an alpha. A powerful one. The air around the wolf shimmered. Bones cracked and reformed with sounds that would have made Freya wince if she weren't frozen in place. Fur receded. Within heartbeats, a man stood where the wolf had been. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with black hair that fell past his shoulders, and a neatly trimmed beard that framed a face marked by both beauty and violence. A jagged scar ran down the left side of his face from temple to jaw, but it was his eyes that held her, golden and intense, containing the same ancient intelligence she'd seen in the wolf. He wore simple leather breeches and nothing else, his muscular torso marked with old battle scars. A silver pendant hung around his neck, bearing that familiar symbol, crown and thorns. Are you hurt? His voice was deep, carrying an authority that made her wolf immediately lower its head in submission. Freya's mouth had gone dry. She managed to shake her head. He stepped closer, and she felt the pull. Her wolf recognized him on a level that transcended logic or reason. Mate, something whispered in the back of her mind. This is our mate. Terror and exhilaration warred in her chest. You're Garrick's daughter. It wasn't a question. His gaze swept over her with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. "Freya, how do you know my name?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I make it my business to know those under my protection." He moved past her to examine the dead rogue, nudging the body with his foot. "These rogues have been plaguing the Borderlands for weeks. They're getting bolder, coming closer to settlements. Who are you?" But she already knew. Some part of her had known the moment she'd seen him shift. He straightened, fixing her with that golden stare. "I am Killian Stormborn, Alpha King of the Realm." He paused, letting the weight of his title settle between them. "And I owe your father a debt that 10 years has not diminished." Freya's basket had fallen when the rogues appeared, herbs scattered across the ground. She bent to gather them, needing something to do with her hands, some way to ground herself in the face of this impossible situation. "My father was a border guard. What debt could you possibly owe him?" "Your father saved my life." Killian crouched beside her, helping collect the feverfew with hands that moved with surprising gentleness. 10 years ago, I was ambushed by a traitor named Oswin, an alpha who conspired against my father, the previous Alpha King. Garrick was there. He witnessed the conspiracy, stood between me and death when Oswin's wolves attacked. Freya's fingers stilled on a stem. "I was told rogues killed him. Oswin's wolves were branded as rogues after the attack. But it was murder, not random violence." Killian's jaw tightened, old anger flickering across his features. "Garrick died before he could testify about what he'd seen. I was 22, freshly crowned after my father's death, with no allies and no proof. Oswin walked free because the wolves who could have confirmed his treason were dead, and the sole survivor was a young alpha most of the council saw as weak. Why wait 10 years to tell his family this?" The question came out sharper than intended, but Freya didn't regret it. 10 years of believing her father had died to nameless rogues when the truth had been so much darker, because I hid behind duty and a promise. Your father made me swear to keep his family in shadow until I could protect you without painting targets on your backs. I told myself the kingdom needed me more than my shame did. And then years hardened into a habit of silence. The admission seemed to cost him. I threw myself into ruling, into proving I was strong enough to hold my father's throne. I told myself there was too much to do, that finding Garrick's family could wait. The truth is, I was ashamed. Your father gave everything to protect me, and I repaid him by letting the man responsible for his death continue breathing. He stood, and Freya rose with him. They were close now, close enough that she could smell pine and smoke on his skin, could see the gold flecks in his eyes that caught the filtered sunlight. 3 months ago, I decided I had hidden behind duty long enough. I sent my most trusted warriors not to learn whether Garrick had left anyone, but to learn who and where. I had known, since the night he bled saving me, that he'd kept a family far from court, and I'd sworn to keep them safe by keeping silent. Shame made me wait. Fear of painting targets on your backs made me wait longer. When my scouts brought word of 2 daughters living in Thornmere, I came on the 10th year of his passing with my guard, to lay my oath on his grave and return what he died holding. I sent my most trusted warriors to learn if Garrick had left anyone behind. When they reported 2 daughters living in Thornmere, I came myself on the 10th anniversary of his death. Those 20 wolves at the grave were my personal guard. We came to pay respects, and to fulfill the oath I swore over his body, to protect his bloodline as he protected mine. Freya's throat tightened. The sword was mine. Your father held it as he died, keeping it from Oswin's wolves. I wanted you to have it returned. Killian's hand lifted, hovering near her cheek but not quite touching. I swore to protect you, Freya. You and your sister both. The connection between them pulsed stronger. That invisible thread pulling taut. Her wolf howled with recognition, with want. This was her mate, the one the moon goddess had chosen for her, but he was also the Alpha King, so far above her station that the very idea of anything between them seemed laughable. I don't need protection, she managed. I've survived 10 years without it. Something that might have been respect flickered in his eyes. So you have. But the world is becoming more dangerous, Freya. Oswin still conspires, still has allies in my council. If he learns that I've found Garrick's daughters, he'll see you as leverage against me. Then don't find us. She stepped back, breaking whatever spell had been weaving itself between them. Forget you came here. Let us fade back into obscurity. I can't. his voice roughened. "I've already seen you." The weight of those words hung in the air. Freya turned away, clutching her basket. "I need to get home. My sister will worry. Let me escort you back. That would only draw more attention." She made herself meet his eyes once more. "Thank you for saving me from the rogues. Consider your debt to my father partially paid." She walked away before he could respond, before the pull between them could undermine her resolve. But she felt his gaze on her back the entire way out of the forest, heavy and burning as a brand. Chapter 3. Stone Walls and Secrets. Freya didn't tell Bryn about Killian for 3 days. She told herself it was to protect her sister, to keep her from worrying. But the truth was harder to admit. She didn't know how to explain the pull she'd felt in the forest, the way her wolf had recognized him as something essential. The attack came on the 4th night. Freya woke to Bryn's scream and the sound of splintering wood. She rolled from her bed, grabbing the knife she now kept beneath her pillow. Through the darkness, she saw shapes moving in their main room. Rogues. At least 3 of them in human form, tearing through their meager possessions. "Bryn, shift," Freya commanded. But her sister was frozen against the far wall, eyes wide with terror. At 16, Bryn's wolf was still new, still unpredictable under stress. The largest rogue turned to Freya, grinning through broken teeth. The healer and her little sister. "Oswin sends his regards." Oswin. The name Killian had spoken. This wasn't random violence. They'd been sent. Freya threw herself at the rogue, her blade finding the meat of his shoulder. He howled, backhanding her so hard she tasted copper. The room spun. Through blurred vision, she saw another rogue reaching for Bryn. Then the door exploded inward in a shower of splinters. Killian filled the doorway in human form, but power rolled off him in waves that made every wolf in the room submit involuntarily. Behind him stood another man, dark-haired and shorter, but carrying himself with the confidence of a trained warrior. "You dare attack those under my protection?" Killian's voice was death itself. The rogues tried to run. They didn't make it past the threshold. Killian moved with a speed that defied his size, his fist connecting with the first rogue's jaw with a crack that echoed through the small cottage. The other man, Tavish, Freya would learn later, took down the second with brutal efficiency. The third rogue, the one who'd struck Freya, shifted to wolf form and lunged at Bryn. Freya's own shift tore through her, faster than it had ever been, driven by desperate need to protect. Her copper wolf form crashed into the rogue, jaws finding his throat before he could reach her sister. When it was over, 3 bodies lay still on their cottage floor. Freya shifted back, breathing hard, her body aching from the rapid transformation. Killian was suddenly there, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine." But she wasn't. Her home was destroyed. Rogues had been sent specifically to kill them, and the Alpha King was touching her with a tenderness that made her chest tight. "How did you know?" "I've had scouts watching your cottage since we met in the forest." His golden eyes searched her face. "I knew Oswin would move against you once he learned I'd made contact. You used us as bait." The words came out flat. "No." His jaw tightened. "I underestimated how quickly he'd act. That's on me." Bryn stumbled forward, and Freya immediately pulled her close. Her sister was shaking, blood on her clothes, though none of it seemed to be hers. Tavish approached, his demeanor respectful. "Your Majesty, the cottage isn't safe. More could come." "I know." Killian straightened. "Freya, Bryn, you're coming to Shadowkeep, tonight." "No." Freya's refusal was automatic. "We can go to the pack house, stay with... Your local alpha can't protect you from what's coming. Oswin has reach, resources, allies who would sell you out without hesitation." He gestured to the ruined cottage. "This is just the beginning. If you stay here, you're dead within a week." Freya wanted to argue, but she looked at the destroyed room, at Bryn's terrified face, at the bodies on their floor. 3 rogues sent to kill 2 Omega females. Oswin wasn't playing games. "Fine," she said quietly, "but we go as guests, not prisoners. And when this is over, when Oswin is dealt with, we return home." Something flickered in Killian's expression. Agreed. They gathered what they could salvage into 2 packs. Freya retrieved her father's sword from beneath the floorboards, wrapping it carefully. When she turned, Killian was watching her with an intensity that made her wolf stir. "You kept it safe," he said. "It's all I have left of him." She slung the pack over her shoulder. "We're ready." The journey to Shadowkeep took 2 days on horseback. Freya had never ridden before, had never left Thornmere's borders. The world beyond her village was vast and strange, filled with forests that seemed to stretch forever, and mountains that pierced the sky. Killian rode beside her, patient when she struggled with the reins, pointing out landmarks in a voice that suggested he'd rather be doing this than ruling a kingdom. Tavish led the way with Bryn, the beta engaging her sister in conversation that gradually eased her fear. Shadowkeep appeared on the 3rd morning, rising from the mountainside. Black stone walls stretched toward the clouds, towers topped with silver that caught the dawn light. It was beautiful and intimidating in equal measure. "Home," Killian said simply, guiding his horse closer to hers. "You'll be safe here." The gates opened at their approach, guards snapping to attention. Servants rushed forward to take the horses. Freya felt dozens of eyes tracking her and Bryn as they followed Killian through courtyards and corridors of gleaming stone. The castle was enormous, filled with tapestries and weapons, and the scent of hundreds of shifters living in close quarters. Freya's senses were overwhelmed by it all. "Lady Moira will show you to your quarters," Killian said, gesturing to a woman approaching from a side corridor. Lady Moira was beautiful in a sharp-edged way, her dark hair elaborately braided, her gown fine enough to cost more than Freya had earned in a year. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "The girls from Thornmere," she said, her tone suggesting they were something unpleasant she'd stepped in. "How quaint. I'll have rooms prepared in the East Wing." "The Royal Wing," Killian corrected, his tone brooking no argument. "They're under my personal protection." Moira's smile tightened. "Of course, Your Majesty. Though I wonder if your betrothed will appreciate such close quarters with common Omegas." "I have no betrothed." "Not yet. But surely you remember the arrangement with my daughter. Such an advantageous match for securing the Northern Territories." Freya's stomach twisted. Of course the Alpha King would have political arrangements, marriages of convenience. What had she expected? "There is no arrangement," Killian said coldly. "Show them to their rooms. Ensure they have everything they need." He left before Freya could speak, disappearing down a corridor with Tavish at his heels. Lady Moira's false smile vanished the moment he was gone. "Let me be clear," she said quietly. "You may have caught the king's momentary interest with your tragic story, but that's all it is. Momentary. He has responsibilities that extend far beyond 2 orphaned girls from nowhere. We didn't ask to be here." Freya replied evenly. "No, but here you are. In the Royal Wing, no less. I suggest you remember your place before you get ideas above your station." Her gaze swept over Freya's worn traveling clothes with obvious disdain. "Come. The servants will draw you baths. You smell of horse and low blood." The rooms Moira showed them to were larger than their entire cottage had been. Soft beds, warm fires, windows overlooking mountain vistas that stole Freya's breath. Servants brought hot water, clean clothes, food enough to feed a dozen people. When they were finally alone, Bryn collapsed onto one of the beds. "This is insane. We're in Shadowkeep. The Alpha King brought us to Shadowkeep. Temporarily." Freya moved to the window, looking out at the sprawling castle grounds. "Once Oswin is dealt with, we go home." "Do we have a home to go back to?" The question hung unanswered. Freya touched the glass, cool against her palm. Somewhere in this massive fortress, Killian was dealing with the political reality of having brought them here. And somewhere, Lady Moira was already plotting how to remove the inconvenient obstacles to her daughter's ambitions. 3 days passed before Freya saw Killian again. She'd spent the time exploring the parts of the castle she was allowed access to, familiarizing herself with the layout. Bryn had made friends with some of the younger warriors in training, her natural enthusiasm winning them over despite her common blood. Freya found herself drawn to the castle's infirmary, a sprawling room filled with beds and supplies. The head healer, an older woman named Gretchen, had eyed Freya skeptically until she'd helped treat a guard's infected wound with a poultice of herbs Gretchen hadn't even known about. "Where did you learn this?" the healer had demanded. "My mother, and her mother before that. Plant knowledge passed down through generations." Gretchen had studied her for a long moment. "We could use someone with your skills, if you're staying." I'm not staying, Freya had replied. But she returned the next day anyway, and the day after that. Healing gave her purpose, kept her mind off the golden-eyed alpha who'd saved her life, and then vanished into his royal duties. On the fourth night, a servant summoned her to Killian's private study. She found him bent over maps, his hair loose around his shoulders, the firelight casting shadows across his scarred face. You sent for me? She stood in the doorway, uncertain. He looked up, and something in his expression softened. Come in. Please. She did, closing the door behind her. The study was warm, filled with books and weapons and the lingering scent of pine smoke. I wanted to apologize, Killian said, for bringing you here and then abandoning you to Moira's tender mercies. You're the Alpha King. I imagine you have more important things to do than entertain refugees. You're not refugees. He moved around the desk, closing the distance between them. And nothing is more important than ensuring you're safe. The pull between them thrummed stronger in the confined space. Freya's wolf pushed forward, wanting to close that last bit of distance to touch him. Oswin has allies in the council. Killian continued. I've been working to identify them, to understand how deep his influence runs. But I wanted you to know. Tavish found something. Your father's belongings. I kept them. All these years, I kept everything he left behind. He led her to a chest in the corner, old wood bound with iron. Inside lay armor, carefully maintained, letters in her father's hand, a cloak that still smelled faintly of the oils he'd used on his blade. Freya's throat closed. You kept these. I owed him everything. Keeping his memory alive was the least I could do. Killian's hand covered hers on the edge of the chest. Freya, I need you to understand. What's between us is a mate bond, she finished quietly. I know, I've felt it since the forest. And you're terrified of it. Aren't you? She finally met his eyes. You're the Alpha King. I'm a common Omega whose father died protecting you. This can't work. Why not? Because the world doesn't work that way. Because Lady Moira is right. You have responsibilities. Because eventually you'll see me as just another obligation from your past. Killian's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. I've never been more certain of anything than I am of this. Of you. Freya closed her eyes against the intensity of his gaze, against the truth of the bond singing between them. I need time. Then take it. He stepped back, and she immediately missed his warmth. But know this. I'm not going anywhere, and neither is what we feel. She left his study with her heart racing, and her wolf howling inside her chest. The mate bond was real. Undeniable. But wanting something and being able to have it were two entirely different things. Chapter 4. Steel and Starlight. The training yard was already filled with warriors when Freya arrived at dawn. Killian stood at the center, stripped to the waist despite the morning chill, his scarred torso gleaming with sweat as he sparred with Tavish. Each movement was controlled violence, decades of training evident in every strike and parry. Freya had tried to refuse when Killian insisted she learn proper defense, but after the attack on their cottage, she'd agreed. Being helpless wasn't something she could afford anymore. You're late, Killian called, not breaking his rhythm with Tavish. Take a practice blade from the rack. The wooden swords were heavier than they looked. Freya selected one that felt manageable, testing its weight. Around the yard, other warriors paused in their training to watch. She felt their curiosity, their judgment. The Alpha King was taking time from his schedule to train a common Omega himself. Tavish bowed out, leaving Freya alone with Killian in the center of the yard. He approached slowly, circling her. Show me your stance. She positioned herself as she'd seen the guards do, feet apart, blade raised. It felt awkward and unnatural. Better than I expected. His hand touched her shoulder, adjusting her position. The contact sent heat racing through her body. But you're too stiff. Fighting isn't about strength. Not for you. It's about speed and survival. Use your opponent's momentum against them. For the next hour, he put her through drills. Basic blocks, strikes, footwork. He was patient but demanding, correcting her form with touches that grew longer each time. By the time he called for a break, Freya was breathing hard, and her arms ached. You learn quickly, Killian said, offering her a water skin. His fingers brushed hers as she took it, and something electric passed between them. the mate bond. It thrummed stronger with every moment they spent together, an invisible thread pulling them closer. He studied her, something like recognition darkening his gaze. "There's a pull between fated mates," he said quietly, as if confessing a secret. "Unclaimed, it is only a whisper. Under mortal threat, it becomes a chord. And an alpha can feel where it leads." Freya saw recognition in his eyes. He felt it too. "Your Majesty," a servant approached nervously. "Lord Oswin has arrived for the banquet tonight. He requests an audience." Killian's expression darkened. "Tell him I'll receive him with the other guests this evening." He was rather insistent. "Then he can be insistent in the great hall with everyone else." Killian's tone left no room for argument. The servant scurried away. Freya lowered the water skin. "The same Oswin who killed my father." "The same. He's an alpha of the Northern Territories, a member of my council. I can't move against him without proof, and he knows it." Frustration edged Killian's voice. 10 years he's walked free while I've gathered evidence. Tonight, he'll parade his loyalty while looking for weaknesses to exploit, and my presence here gives him ammunition. Your presence here is none of his concern." But Killian's jaw tightened, acknowledging the truth of her words. That evening, servants brought Freya a gown far finer than anything she'd ever worn. Deep green silk that brought out her eyes, embroidered with silver thread. Bryn helped her dress, chattering excitedly about the friends she'd made among the younger warriors. "They don't care that we're from Thornmere," her sister said, braiding Freya's copper hair into an elaborate style. "They only care that we're under the Alpha King's protection. That won't last forever." Freya reminded her gently. "We're guests, Bryn. This isn't our home." Maybe it could be. Bryn's reflection met hers in the mirror. "You feel it when you're near him. I can sense it even from across the yard." The mate bond. Freya's hands stilled. "It doesn't matter what I feel." "Why not?" "Because he's the Alpha King, and I'm nobody." Bryn turned her around forcefully. "Father died protecting him. That makes us somebody. And the moon goddess doesn't make mistakes when she chooses mates." The great hall was magnificent, filled with hundreds of nobles and their retinues. Torches blazed in iron sconces, casting dancing shadows across tapestries depicting ancient battles. Long tables groaned under the weight of roasted meats, fresh bread, and flagons of wine. Killian sat at the high table on a throne carved from dark wood. He'd changed into formal attire. Black leather and silver clasps, a crown of twisted metal resting on his dark hair. He looked every inch the king. Powerful and remote. Lady Moira appeared at Freya's elbow before she'd taken 3 steps into the hall. "How quaint. You actually came. I suppose someone lent you appropriate clothing." "The Alpha King's servants provided it," Freya replied evenly. "How generous of them." Moira's smile was poisonous. "Tell me, do you truly believe you belong here? You, a healer from a backwater village, sitting among nobles who've spent their lives mastering politics and intrigue? I don't belong anywhere but where I choose to be." Bold words from someone with no power, no connections, no future beyond the Alpha King's fleeting interest. Moira leaned closer, her voice dropping. "He needs a queen who can strengthen alliances, who understands courtly matters, who won't embarrass him in front of the council. You're a pleasant distraction. Nothing more. The sooner you accept that, the less it will hurt when he sets you aside for someone suitable." Before Freya could respond, a hush fell over the hall. A man entered through the main doors, flanked by guards wearing unfamiliar colors. He was broad-shouldered and handsome in a hard way, his hair gray at the temples, his eyes calculating. Oswin, the man who'd ordered her father killed. Freya's hands clenched into fists. Her wolf surged forward, demanding blood. It took every ounce of control to remain still as he approached the high table and bowed. "Your Majesty, thank you for receiving me." "Lord Oswin," Killian's voice was carefully neutral. "Welcome to Shadowkeep. I trust your journey was pleasant." "Quite. Though I was surprised to hear rumors that you've taken in refugees from Thornmere." Oswin's gaze swept the hall until it landed on Freya. "Garrick's daughters, I'm told." "How interesting. They're under my personal protection. Any who threaten them threaten me. I wouldn't dream of it, Majesty. Though I wonder if your council knows about this arrangement. Some might question the wisdom of elevating common blood to such prominence. especially when so many noble houses offer suitable alliances. The implication was clear. Freya was a liability, a poor choice that weakened Killian's position. Killian rose from his throne, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Are you questioning my judgment, Oswin?" For a heartbeat, tension crackled through the hall. Then Oswin bowed lower. "Never, Majesty. I merely express concern for your well-being." "Your concern is noted and dismissed. Enjoy the feast." It was a clear dismissal. Oswin retreated to a lower table, but his eyes tracked Freya's every movement throughout the meal. She couldn't eat. Her stomach churned with rage and helplessness. That man had killed her father, had sent rogues to murder her and Bryn, and now he sat eating Killian's food and smiling as if he had every right to be here. When the feast finally ended, Freya slipped out through a side door into one of the castle's gardens. The night air was cold against her flushed skin, the stars bright overhead. Running away won't solve anything. She spun to find Killian approaching through the shadows, his crown removed, looking more like the warrior from the forest than the king from the hall. "I needed air before I did something stupid," she admitted. "Like attacking Oswin in front of the entire court?" The thought crossed my mind. He stopped close enough that she could feel his warmth in the chill night. "I know what you're feeling. I've wanted to tear his throat out for 10 years. Then why don't you?" The question burst out of her. "You're the Alpha King. You could execute him tonight. And start a civil war? Oswin has allies, powerful families who would use his death as an excuse to challenge my authority. I need proof of his crimes, ironclad evidence that will turn his supporters against him. Otherwise, I'm just a tyrant eliminating political opponents." Freya turned away, blinking back frustrated tears. "So, we do nothing while he walks free. Not nothing." Killian's hand found her shoulder, turning her back to face him. "We gather evidence. We build alliances. We wait for him to make a mistake. And when the moment comes, we strike without mercy. How long did you wait to come find us? How long did duty keep you from honoring your debt to my father?" The words were cruel, meant to wound. She saw them land in the tightening of his jaw, the flash of pain in his golden eyes. "Too long," he said quietly. "I was a coward who let shame and duty become excuses for inaction. I won't make that mistake again. Lady Moira thinks I'm a distraction, that I'll drag you down, weaken your position. Moira is a viper who wants her daughter crowned queen for political gain. But she's right, isn't she?" Freya stepped closer, drawn by the bond humming between them. "I'm not suitable. I have no training in politics, no powerful connections. I'm just an Omega from a village you've probably forgotten the name of. Thornmere." His hands framed her face, gentle despite their strength. "I remember everything about you. The way you faced those rogues with nothing but a knife. How you stood in my study and demanded time instead of just accepting what we both feel. The care you show in the infirmary. Healing warriors who would never give you a second glance in any other circumstance. Killian, the mate bond isn't a distraction. It's the moon goddess telling us we're meant to face this world together. And I'm terrified, Freya. Terrified that wanting you will put you in danger. That Oswin or someone like him will use you against me. That I'll fail to protect you the way I failed to protect your father." His honesty broke something open in her chest. "I'm terrified too. Of this bond. Of what it means. Of a life I never prepared for. Then be terrified with me." His forehead pressed against hers, his breath warm on her lips. "But don't run from this. From us." She didn't know who moved first. Their lips met in a kiss that started gentle and turned desperate. 10 years of grief and guilt and longing pouring into the connection between them. Freya's hands tangled in his hair, pulling him closer as his arms locked around her waist. The mate bond sang between them, recognizing what they'd both been fighting. This was right. This was home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Killian kept her close. "I meant what I said in my study. I'm not going anywhere. Whatever comes, we face it together." Freya nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat. In the distance, the castle lights blazed against the darkness. But here in this garden with this impossible man, she finally felt like she might belong. Chapter 5. Shadows and Snares. The message arrived 3 days after the banquet, slipped under Freya's door in the dead of night. She found it at dawn, 3 days after the banquet, slipped under Freya's door in the dead of night. She found it at dawn, 3 days after the banquet, slipped under Freya's door in the dead of night. a folded parchment sealed with black wax bearing no mark. The words inside were simple, devastating. Your sister walks the eastern forest alone. Come before sunset, or we return her in pieces. Tell no one, or she dies screaming. The old fortress beyond Raven's Creek. Freya's hands shook as she read it twice, 3 times. Her first instinct was to run to Killian, to let him handle this with his warriors and his authority. But the threat was clear. Tell anyone, and Bryn died. She moved through her room mechanically, pulling on her plainest clothes, strapping a knife to her belt. The sword her father had carried felt too heavy, too conspicuous. This required speed, not steel. Bryn's chambers were empty when Freya checked. The bed cold. How long had she been gone? Had they taken her from the castle itself, or lured her out somehow? It didn't matter. What mattered was getting her back. Freya slipped through the castle's side passages, avoiding guards and servants. The eastern forest lay beyond the training yards, accessible through a small gate in the outer walls. She'd learned the castle's layout over the past weeks, knowledge that now served a desperate purpose. The forest swallowed her quickly, ancient trees blocking out the morning sun. She followed the faint trail toward Raven's Creek, every instinct screaming that this was a trap. But what choice did she have? Bryn was all the family she had left. The mate bond hummed at the edge of her consciousness, that invisible thread connecting her to Killian. She could feel him somewhere in the castle, occupied with his endless duties. Part of her wanted to pull on that bond, to scream for help through whatever magic linked them. But the message had been clear. Come alone, or Bryn died. Raven's Creek was a narrow stream cutting through rocky terrain. Beyond it, barely visible through the trees, stood the ruins of an old fortress. Stone walls crumbling with age, towers collapsed into rubble, a perfect place for an ambush. Freya crossed the creek, water soaking through her boots. Her wolf stirred uneasily, sensing danger but unable to pinpoint its source. Every shadow could hide an enemy, every sound could herald attack. The fortress's main gate hung open, rusted hinges groaning in the wind. Inside, the courtyard was overgrown with weeds and wild roses. At its center, tied to a post, sat Bryn. "Freya, no!" her sister screamed. "It's a trap! Run!" Freya was already moving, racing across the courtyard. She'd taken 3 steps when figures emerged from behind the broken walls. Rogues, at least a dozen of them, forming a circle that cut off all escape. And walking through the main gate behind her came Oswin, a smile playing at his lips. "Predictable," he said, his voice carrying easy authority. "The healer who can't resist saving others, even at the cost of her own life. Garrick was the same way, you know. That's what got him killed." Freya's hand went to her knife. "Let her go. Your quarrel is with Killian, not with us. My quarrel is with anyone who stands between me and the throne I should have held 10 years ago." Oswin circled her slowly, a predator toying with prey. "Your father witnessed something he shouldn't have. A conversation between myself and the old Alpha King, Killian's father. I was explaining why the kingdom needed new leadership, why the Stormborn line had grown weak. Garrick overheard every word. So you killed him." The words came out flat, but rage burned beneath them. "I eliminated a threat to my plans. When I arranged the ambush that was meant to remove young Killian from the succession, your father stood between my wolves and their target. He died protecting a boy who hadn't yet proven himself worthy of breathing, let alone ruling." Freya's wolf snarled inside her, demanding blood. "And Killian? You failed to kill him. A temporary setback. I was patient. I built alliances, gathered supporters, waited for the perfect moment to strike. But then the young king started asking questions about that day, started investigating his father's death. I had to be careful, had to make sure no evidence linked me to the conspiracy." Oswin's expression hardened. "And then he found you. Garrick's daughters, living proof that your father died protecting him. A constant reminder of the debt he owes, a weakness I can exploit. We're not his weakness." But even as she said it, Freya knew it was a lie. The mate bond made them each other's greatest vulnerability. "Aren't you?" Oswin gestured to the rogues. "Here you are, walking into my trap alone because I threatened your sister. And somewhere in Shadowkeep, Killian is probably tearing the castle apart trying to find you both. Predictable, pathetic. Proof that he's not fit to rule. A woman stepped from the shadows of the ruined tower. Lady Moira, her fine gowns replaced with traveling clothes. She looked at Freya with cold satisfaction. "I told you that you didn't belong," Moira said. "But you wouldn't listen. Now you'll die here, and your deaths will give Oswin the leverage he needs to remove Killian from power. The council won't follow a regicide. They will when I provide proof that Killian murdered the Alpha King's daughters to cover up his own father's crimes. After all, who would believe otherwise? A king desperate to hide the truth about how he came to power." Oswin drew a blade, studying its edge in the dim light filtering through the ruins. "Your bodies will be found with evidence linking them to Killian's personal guard. Tragic, really. But necessary." Freya's mind raced. She couldn't fight a dozen rogues alone. Her shift was too slow, her combat training too limited. But she had to try. Had to give Bryn a chance to escape. "Freya, don't," Bryn sobbed. "He's going to kill us anyway. Don't give him what he wants." "I'm not giving him anything." Freya drew her knife, settling into the defensive stance Killian had taught her. "But I'm not dying quietly either," Oswin laughed. "Just like your father, defiant to the end." "Very well. Kill the healer first. Make sure the younger one watches." The rogues advanced. Freya's wolf surged forward, preparing for the shift that would come too slowly. Her muscles began to burn with the beginning of transformation. Then terror unlike anything she'd ever felt lanced through her chest. Not her terror, Killian's. The mate bond flared to life with such intensity it drove her to her knees. She felt his panic, his desperate need to reach her, his wolf howling with the knowledge that its mate was in mortal danger. And beneath that, something else. A pulling sensation, as if he was using the bond to track her location. "He's coming," she gasped. Oswin's confident smile faltered. "Impossible. You came alone. No one followed you." The mate bond. Freya forced herself upright despite the overwhelming emotions flooding through the connection. "He can feel me. He knows where I am. Then we kill you quickly and leave before he arrives." Oswin gestured sharply to the rogues. "Now." 3 of them lunged at once. Freya's shift finally completed, her copper wolf barely avoiding the first set of claws. But there were too many, coming from too many directions. Teeth found her shoulder. Claws raked her side. Pain exploded through her body. Through the blood and chaos, she heard Bryn screaming. Saw another rogue moving toward her sister with deliberate intent. They were going to kill Bryn right in front of her. And there was nothing she could do to stop it. No. Something deep inside Freya's chest cracked open. Not physical pain, but something else entirely. A well of power she'd never known existed. Dormant since birth. Waiting for the moment of absolute desperate need. Her wolf's copper fur began to glow. At first it was subtle. A shimmer along her spine. A golden gleam in her eyes. But it spread rapidly, pulsing outward from her core, until her entire body radiated light. The rogues attacking her stumbled back, confused and momentarily blinded. The power wasn't destructive. It was the opposite. Healing energy in its purest form, raw and ancient, and utterly foreign to anything Freya had ever experienced. She could feel it in her blood, thrumming in time with her heartbeat. This was what her mother's line had carried, what generations of healers had passed down until it concentrated in her. Magic. True magic. Not just the ability to shift forms. The rogue advancing on Bryn yelped as golden light washed over him, burning where it touched his corrupted essence. Rogues who'd abandoned their humanity couldn't withstand the pure healing power. It rejected their twisted nature like poison rejecting medicine. "What is she?" one of the rogues screamed, backing away. Oswin's face had gone pale. Impossible. That bloodline was supposed to be extinct. The Moonweavers died out centuries ago. Freya didn't understand what he meant. All she knew was that power continued to pour from her in waves, driving back the rogues, creating a protective barrier around herself and Bryn. Her wounds began to close, flesh knitting together with supernatural speed. "Kill them!" Oswin roared, "before she learns to control it." But it was too late. The sound of pounding hooves echoed through the forest, followed by howls that made every wolf present freeze instinctively. Alpha command, powerful enough to stop hearts. Killian burst through the fortress gate in human form, Tavish and 24 warriors at his back. His golden eyes found Freya immediately, taking in her glowing form, the rogues surrounding her, the blood on the ground. Rage transformed his features into something terrifying and beautiful. "You dare touch what is mine." His shift was instantaneous, the massive white wolf appearing where the man had stood. And then he was among the rogues, tearing through them with a violence that spoke of every protective instinct screaming to destroy anything that threatened his mate. Chapter 6. Claiming through blood. The battle was chaos incarnate. Killian's white wolf tore through the rogues with a brutality that transcended mere violence. This was vengeance given fangs and fury. Each rogue that had dared touch Freya paid with their lives, throat torn out before they could even register their deaths. Tavish and the other warriors engaged Oswin's forces with ruthless efficiency. Steel rang against claws. Blood spattered ancient stone. The fortress courtyard became a slaughterhouse, but Freya's attention was locked on her own transformation. The golden light pouring from her copper wolf form pulsed with each heartbeat, responding to her desperate need to protect. She could feel the energy flowing through her, foreign yet somehow innate, as if it had always been there waiting to wake. One of Killian's warriors fell near her, his side torn open by rogue claws. Without thinking, Freya pressed her glowing form against him. The healing power surged outward, and she watched in amazement as his wounds began to close. Not completely. The magic wasn't that strong yet, but enough to stabilize him, to pull him back from death's edge. What in the moon goddess's name? The warrior gasped, staring at her in awe. Another fell, then another. Freya moved between them, a copper beacon in the carnage, her healing light keeping Killian's forces on their feet when they should have been bleeding out. The power drained her, each use taking something vital from her core. But she pushed through the exhaustion. These warriors had come to save her and Bryn. The least she could do was keep them alive. Oswin had shifted, his gray wolf circling the perimeter of the battle. He was watching, Freya realized, waiting for an opening. His eyes tracked Killian's movements with the patience of a predator who'd spent 10 years planning this moment. Lady Moira tried to flee, slipping toward the broken section of fortress wall. Tavish intercepted her in 2 powerful strides, his hand closing around her arm with bruising force. "Let me go!" she shrieked. "I'm a member of the royal court. You have no right—" "You're a traitor who conspired to murder the Alpha King's mate," Tavish said coldly. "You have no rights left to speak of." He bound her hands with rope from his pack, securing her to an iron ring embedded in the wall. Moira's protests turned to screams of rage, but no one paid her attention. The battle raged on. Killian's wolf had decimated half the rogues single-handedly. The remaining ones broke and ran, their nerve failing in the face of such overwhelming power. Killian let them go. His focus was singular now, locked on the gray wolf still circling with predatory intent. Oswin. The 2 alphas faced each other across the blood-soaked courtyard. Freya's heart clenched. This was the confrontation 10 years in the making, the resolution to the conspiracy that had started with her father's death. They launched at each other simultaneously, 2 forces of nature colliding. Oswin was older, more experienced, but Killian fought with the fury of a mate protecting his bonded, and that made him unstoppable. Their battle shook the ancient stones, drew blood that steamed in the cold air. Freya wanted to help, but her healing power was useless in direct combat. All she could do was watch, her wolf pacing anxiously, as they tore into each other with savage abandon. Then she caught movement from the corner of her eye. Another rogue, one she'd thought had fled, circling around behind Killian while he was locked in combat with Oswin. The rogue's intention was clear: wait until both alphas were weakened, then strike the killing blow. Freya's body moved before her mind caught up. She shifted to human form, grabbed a fallen sword from the ground, and threw herself between the attacking rogue and Killian's exposed back. The blade she held wasn't her father's sword. That was still hidden back at the castle. This was a stranger's weapon, unfamiliar weight and balance. But desperation made her accurate. She thrust upward as the rogue lunged, felt steel punch through fur and flesh. The rogue's momentum carried him forward, driving the blade deeper. His jaws snapped closed inches from her face, hot breath reeking of death. Then pain exploded through her side. Oswin. While she'd been focused on the rogue, the gray alpha had broken from his fight with Killian and lunged. His fangs found her ribs, tearing deep. Blood poured hot down her skin. The world tilted. She heard Killian's roar, felt his rage through the mate bond like a physical blow. The rogue she'd stabbed collapsed. Dead. Oswin released her, backing away as Killian's white wolf came at him with murder in every line of his body. Freya hit the ground hard. Her vision swam. The wound in her side was catastrophic. She could feel that much through the shock. Mortal. She was dying. Through fading consciousness, she watched Killian tear Oswin apart. There was no mercy. No quick death. This was retribution for Garrick. For 10 years of conspiracy. For daring to touch Killian's mate. When it was over, Oswin's gray wolf lay still, throat torn out, eyes vacant. Then Killian was there, shifting to human form, gathering Freya into his arms. His face was streaked with blood, Oswin's blood, his golden eyes wild with panic. "No, no, no," he chanted, pressing his hands against her wound. "Freya, stay with me. Don't you dare leave me." "Got him," she whispered, her lips curving in a weak smile. "Stopped him from killing you, you foolish, brave, impossible woman." His voice broke. "Tavish, get a healer now." "Won't make it," Freya managed. Blood filled her mouth. Her healing power had burned itself out, keeping the warriors alive. She had nothing left to save herself. Killian's hands framed her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Listen to me. There's a way to save you, but it will bind us permanently. The claiming bite. If I give it now, my life force will sustain yours until you heal. But you have to accept it willingly, even now. Do you understand? The mate bond. He was offering to complete it through his bite, sharing his strength to keep her alive. But it would be permanent, irreversible. She'd be bound to him for life. Do it," she breathed. "Please, Killian. I don't want to die." "This isn't how I wanted this to happen," he said, his thumb tracing her cheekbone with heartbreaking gentleness. "You deserve moonlight and ceremony, not blood and dirt." "I deserve you," she corrected. "Just you. Nothing else matters." His eyes flashed gold, wolf rising to the surface. He bent his head to the junction of her neck and shoulder, the traditional claiming spot. His lips brushed her skin once, gentle as a prayer. Then his teeth sank deep. Pain and pleasure exploded through her body in equal measure. The mate bond that had been building between them suddenly blazed to life, a connection so profound it rewrote every cell of her being. She felt Killian pouring his life force into her through the bite, felt his wolf recognizing hers at the deepest level. "Mine," his wolf growled through the bond. "Ours," her wolf responded, finally finding its voice. The world went white. When Freya opened her eyes again, she was lying on soft furs in an unfamiliar room. Sunlight streamed through high windows. Her side ached, but the wound was closed, leaving only a pale scar. Killian sat beside her bed, his head bowed, one hand holding hers. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, several days' worth of beard growth on his jaw. "How long?" she asked, her voice hoarse. His head snapped up, relief flooding his features. 3 days. "You've been unconscious for 3 days. He pressed her hand to his lips. "I thought, when you wouldn't wake." "I'm here." She squeezed his fingers weakly. The bite worked. It initiated the bond. But it's not complete. His expression grew serious. "That requires acceptance under a full moon, a conscious choice made when you're not dying. You can still reject it if you want. If this isn't what you truly desire." Freya reached up to touch the bite mark on her neck. It was healed but permanent. A silver scar in the perfect shape of his teeth. Through the bond, she could feel everything he felt. His love, his fear, his desperate hope that she wouldn't regret what he'd done. What happened to Oswin? To Moira? Oswin is dead. His conspiracy died with him. Moira is imprisoned, awaiting trial for treason. Killian's voice hardened. She confessed everything, hoping for leniency. There won't be any. And Bryn? Safe, traumatized but unharmed. She's been here every day waiting for you to wake. His thumb traced circles on her palm. "Freya, I need you to understand. The choice is still yours. I won't force this bond on you just because I used it to save your life." She could feel his sincerity through their connection, Feel how much he meant those words despite how terrified he was that she might walk away. The Alpha King, who commanded armies, was helpless before her choice. "Ask me again," she said softly. "Under the full moon, with ceremony and witnesses. Let me choose you properly the way you deserve." His shoulders sagged with relief. "You're certain?" "I've never been more certain of anything." She pulled him down until his forehead rested against hers. "You're mine, Killian Stormborn, and I'm yours. Nothing will change that." He kissed her then, gentle and reverent, sealing the promise between them. Outside, the sun continued its journey across the sky. But in that room, with her mate's arms around her and the bond humming between them, Freya finally understood what it meant to be home. Chapter 7. Under the moon's witness recovery was slower than Freya expected. The claiming bite had saved her life, but her body still needed time to heal from the trauma. She spent a week confined to bed, Killian rarely leaving her side except when royal duties absolutely demanded it. Brynn visited daily, bringing stories from the castle to distract her sister. On the 5th day, she climbed onto the bed beside Freya, her young face serious. "I never thanked you," Brynn said quietly, "for coming after me, for risking everything. You're my sister. There was never a question. But you almost died." Brynn's voice cracked. "When I saw Oswin bite you, when you fell, I thought I'd lost you too. First mother and father, and now you." Freya pulled her close, ignoring the protest from her healing ribs. "I'm here. We both are. That's what matters. You're going to be queen." Brynn pulled back, wiping her eyes. "The Alpha King's mate. Everything's changed." "Not everything. You're still my annoying little sister." Brynn managed a watery laugh. "And you're still terrible at accepting compliments." But her sister was right. Everything had changed. The claiming bite on Freya's neck marked her as Killian's mate. But it wasn't complete. The bond hummed between them, stronger than before, yet still waiting for final acceptance under the full moon, if she chose to accept it. The doubt crept in during the quiet hours when Killian was pulled away to council meetings, to decisions that affected thousands of lives. Freya would lie in bed, feeling the weight of the crown she hadn't yet earned. She was a healer from Thornmere, a village most nobles had never heard of. What did she know about ruling a kingdom? About navigating court politics or managing alliances? Lady Moira's words echoed in her mind despite everything. "You don't belong. You'll drag him down." On the 8th day, Killian found her standing at the window, watching the castle grounds below. Warriors trained in the yard, servants moved through gardens, life continuing regardless of her internal crisis. "You're thinking too loud," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I can feel your turmoil through the bond. I'm not ready for this." The admission hurt to speak, to be queen, to stand beside you in front of the council. "I don't know how to be what you need." His hands tightened slightly. "What I need is you, exactly as you are." "That's not enough." She turned in his arms. "You need someone who understands politics, who can strengthen alliances, who won't embarrass you in front of alphas who've been consolidating power since before I was born." "Freya, the full moon is tomorrow night. You said I could refuse the bond, that the choice was mine." She met his golden eyes, saw the pain her words caused through their connection. "What if I'm not ready? What if I never am?" Killian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was measured. "Then we wait. A year, 10 years, however long you need." The claiming bite initiated the bond, but you're right. You have to choose this freely. I won't force you into a life you don't want. And if I can't do it, if I'm not capable of being queen, then we find another way. His thumb traced her jaw. "I didn't fall for you because you could navigate court politics. I fell for you because you faced rogues with nothing but a knife. Because you healed my warriors while bleeding yourself. Because you threw yourself in front of an alpha to save my life, knowing you'd die." His forehead pressed against hers. "You're already everything I need. The rest is just details we'll figure out together." A knock interrupted them. Tavish entered, carrying a wooden box marked with familiar symbols. "Your Majesty, I apologize for the intrusion, but I found something I thought Freya should see." He set the box on a nearby table, opening it carefully. Inside lay letters, a cloak, small trinkets, her father's belongings that Killian had kept all these years. But Tavish pulled out a sealed envelope, the wax unbroken. This was at the bottom, hidden beneath a false panel. It's addressed, "To be opened only in dire circumstances." Tavish handed it to Freya. "I think those circumstances have arrived." Freya's hands shook as she broke the seal. The letter inside was in her father's hand, the ink faded but readable. "To whoever finds this, if you're reading these words, then I am dead, and the danger I feared has found my family. My name is Garrick of Thornmere, and I write this to explain truths I could never speak aloud while living. 10 years ago, I witnessed a conspiracy that threatened the Alpha King's life. An Alpha named Oswin spoke treason, planning the murder of our king. I heard every word, but I was alone. No witnesses to support my testimony. When I tried to report this, Oswin moved against me, attempting to silence me permanently. Only the intervention of the king's son, young Killian, saved my life that day. But the attempt on my life revealed something crucial. I had a target on my back. And worse, I had 2 young daughters who could be used against me. I made a choice. I asked Killian to keep my family's existence secret, to tell no one that I had survived or that I had daughters. Better that we fade into obscurity than become weapons in Oswin's hands. The young prince agreed, understanding the necessity even as it pained him. Years passed. I watched my girls grow, knowing every day that my silence kept them safe. Freya, strong and kind, who healed without asking for thanks. Bryn, bright and brave, who never knew how precious her very existence was. If you're reading this, then Oswin has finally succeeded in killing me. But know this. I died protecting something far more valuable than my own life. I died keeping my daughters out of a war they never asked to be part of. To Freya and Bryn, should this letter reach you, I loved you more than words can express. Every moment spent with you was worth the danger. Every sacrifice was worth your safety. You were never a burden. You were my greatest treasure. To Killian, should you find them, I release you from your promise of silence. Protect them as I could not. They are good souls who deserve better than a father's mistakes. Garrick. Freya's tears fell onto the parchment, blurring some of the words. Her father had known. All those years, he'd lived with the knowledge that telling the truth about his family would paint targets on their backs. So he'd chosen silence, chosen obscurity, chosen to let his daughters think he was just a common warrior, rather than someone who'd been tangled in royal conspiracy. "He protected us until the very end," she whispered. Killian's arms came around her. "He was braver than I gave him credit for. I thought he'd never mentioned having daughters because he didn't trust me. But he was keeping you safe the only way he knew how." Bryn moved to Freya's other side, reading the letter over her shoulder. "Father knew Oswin would come for us eventually. That's why he trained us to fight. Why he always told us to be ready to run. Now Oswin is dead," Tavish said quietly. "The threat your father feared is gone. You're free. Free." The word echoed in Freya's mind. Her father had spent 10 years in fear, and all because he'd witnessed the truth. All because he'd tried to do the right thing, and now Killian was offering her a choice. Accept the bond and become queen, or walk away. But was she really free if she let fear control her? The full moon rose the following night, silver and perfect in a cloudless sky. The ceremony would be held in Shadowkeep's ancient courtyard, witnessed by every alpha in the kingdom. Freya stood in her chambers, dressed in white silk embroidered with silver thread, her copper hair braided with moonflowers. "You look like a queen," Bryn said, adjusting Freya's cloak. "I don't feel like one." "Good. The moment you start feeling like you belong, you'll probably turn into Lady Moira." Bryn's joke fell flat, but Freya appreciated the attempt. "You'll be fine. Just be yourself." That's who Killian fell for. Servants came to escort her to the courtyard. Freya walked through corridors lit by torches, her heart hammering against her ribs. She could still refuse. The ceremony gave her that right. If she stood before all those alphas and said no, they would honor it. The courtyard was filled with wolves in human form, every alpha of the realm present. Torches blazed around the perimeter. At the center, beneath the moon's full light, Killian waited. He wore black leather and silver, a crown of twisted metal on his dark hair. He looked every inch the king. Powerful, commanding, untouchable. Then his eyes met hers, and she saw the vulnerability there. The fear that she might reject him in front of his entire kingdom, the desperate hope that she wouldn't. The mate bond sang between them, pulling her forward. An elder stepped forward to officiate, his voice carrying across the silent crowd. We gather under the moon goddess's light to witness the completion of a mate bond. Freya of Thornmere, do you come here of your own free will? I do. Her voice was steady. Do you understand that accepting this bond is permanent? Binding your life to Alpha King Killian Stormborn's for as long as you both shall live? I understand. Then speak your choice before the moon and these witnesses. Will you accept this bond, or do you reject it? The moment stretched. Freya could feel every eye on her, feel the weight of the decision. If she accepted, she'd be queen. She'd face challenges she wasn't prepared for, make mistakes that would affect thousands. She'd spend her life learning to be something she'd never imagined becoming. But she'd do it beside Killian, with his strength supporting her, with the mate bond connecting them, with the knowledge that her father had sacrificed everything so she could have choices. This was her choice. Not Lady Moira's, not the council's, not even Killian's. Hers. I accept, she said clearly. I accept Killian Stormborn as my mate, my king, my partner in all things. I accept the bond the moon goddess has woven between us, and I accept the responsibility of standing beside him, learning to be the queen this kingdom needs. The mate bond exploded to life, the partial connection becoming whole and permanent. Power rushed through her, not just Killian's, but something shared between them. She gasped as her wolf and his recognized each other completely, merging their essences until she couldn't tell where she ended and he began. Killian crossed to her in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms. Mine, he breathed against her hair. Ours, she corrected, remembering the words her wolf had spoken during the claiming bite. He kissed her before the entire assembly, sealing the bond under the moon's approval. When they finally broke apart, the elder spoke again. Alpha King Killian Stormborn, do you renounce all claim to other mates or consorts? I do. There is only Freya. There will only ever be Freya. Then by the power invested in me by the moon goddess and the ancient laws of our kind, I declare you bound. What the moon has joined, let no wolf separate. The assembled alphas howled their approval, the sound rising to the stars. Freya felt the weight of the crown settle on her head. Not physical metal, but the responsibility she'd accepted. She was queen now, for better or worse. Later, Tavish approached with news. Lady Moira has been formally banished. She'll be escorted to the border at dawn and forbidden from ever returning to your territories. Good, Killian said, his arm around Freya's waist. Let her serve as a warning to anyone else who would conspire against the crown. As the celebration continued around them, Freya leaned into her mate's embrace, feeling the bond pulse with contentment. She still didn't know how to be queen, still wasn't sure she was ready for everything that title entailed. But she'd figure it out, one day at a time, with Killian beside her and the memory of her father's sacrifice driving her forward. Chapter 8. Legacy of the fallen 6 months had passed since the claiming ceremony beneath the full moon. Spring had come to the kingdom, melting winter's grip and bringing new life to fields that had lain dormant through the coldest months. Freya stood at the window of her chambers, no longer a guest room but the queen's quarters, watching the castle grounds below transform with the season. She'd changed too, though not in ways visible to the eye. The frightened healer from Thornmere had become someone who could stand before the Council of Alphas and speak with authority about establishing healing networks across the realm, someone who could navigate court politics without losing herself in the process. It hadn't been easy. There were still nobles who whispered about her common blood, still moments when she felt utterly unprepared for the weight of the crown. But Killian had been true to his word. They faced everything together, his strength supporting her when doubt crept in, her compassion tempering his harder edges. Your Majesty, the morning reports. A servant entered with scrolls detailing the kingdom's affairs. Freya had learned to read these documents, to understand the intricate web of alliances and resources that kept their realm functioning. Thank you, Meredith. She'd learned all the servants' names, too, much to their surprise. Queens didn't typically bother with such details, but Freya had never stopped being the healer who saw people as individuals rather than positions. The reports were encouraging. The healing network she'd established was thriving. In every major settlement, trained healers now worked using both traditional plant knowledge and, for those blessed with the gift, magical healing abilities. Freya had discovered 3 other shifters with dormant powers similar to hers, the golden healing light that had awakened during her desperate fight to save Bryn. She'd personally trained them, teaching them to control and direct the energy that could mean the difference between life and death. A knock at her door revealed Bryn, no longer the frightened girl who'd been used as bait. At 17, she'd grown into a formidable young woman, her body hardened by months of training under Tavish's demanding instruction. She wore the leather armor of a warrior now, a sword strapped to her hip with easy confidence. "The Alpha King requests your presence in the courtyard," Bryn said, grinning. "He says it's time." Freya's heart clenched. She knew what today was. The anniversary of their father's death, 11 years now. She and Killian had planned this visit for weeks, waiting for the right moment when duties could be set aside for personal remembrance. They rode out from Shadowkeep as the sun climbed higher, just the 2 of them on horseback. Killian had wanted to bring guards, but Freya insisted. This journey was private, sacred. The rogues that had once plagued the Borderlands were gone, scattered after Oswin's death removed their organizing force. The ride to Thornmere took most of the day. The village had changed in Freya's absence. New buildings constructed, fields expanded. Her presence as queen had brought attention and resources to the small settlement that had raised her. She saw familiar faces as they passed through, people who'd known her as simply Freya the healer. Now they bowed, called her, "Your Majesty," and she felt the bittersweet ache of distance that power created. The burial ground lay beyond the village, unchanged by time. Ancient oaks still stood sentinel over the honored dead. Her father's grave was as she remembered it, though someone, probably villagers, had kept it clear of weeds and placed fresh wildflowers regularly. Freya dismounted, her hand finding Killian's as they approached the simple stone marker. Garrick of Thornmere. Warrior. Father. The same words she'd read 1,000 times, but now they carried different weight. She understood what they'd cost. "I brought someone to meet you, Father," she said quietly, aware of Killian's presence beside her. "Though I suppose you already knew him. The boy you died protecting has grown into a man worthy of the sacrifice." Killian knelt, placing a handful of wildflowers at the grave's base. "I never properly thanked you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "For standing between death and a foolish young alpha who thought he was invincible. For keeping your family hidden so they'd be safe from my enemies. For every choice you made that led to this moment." Freya watched her mate, her husband in all but the formal ceremony they'd hold next month. Honor her father's memory. Through the bond, she felt his genuine grief, his respect for a man he'd known only briefly, but who'd changed the course of his life. "I wish you could have seen what your sacrifice made possible," Freya continued, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Bryn is training to be a warrior. She's strong, Father. Strong and brave. Everything you raised her to be. And her voice broke. "I'm queen now. I still don't always know what I'm doing, but I'm trying. I'm using everything you and Mother taught me to help people. To heal not just bodies, but the wounds in our society." Killian stood, reaching into the pack he'd brought. When he withdrew the sword, her father's sword, the one left by the white wolves so many months ago, Freya's breath caught. "This belonged to me," Killian said, turning the blade so sunlight caught the crown and thorns etched into its pommel. 10 years ago, when your father stood between Oswin's wolves and my life, this sword was in my hand. I was young, injured, barely holding my ground. Garrick took this blade from me, told me to run, that he'd hold them off. He traced the symbols with one finger. I refused to leave him. We fought together, back to back, until my warriors arrived. But Oswin's wolves were numerous and vicious. Your father took a mortal wound protecting my left side. As he fell, he gripped this sword, wouldn't let it go. His last words were, "Keep them safe." I thought he meant my people, my kingdom. I didn't understand he meant his daughters. Freya's tears fell freely now. So when the wolves came to leave it at his grave, it was my way of returning what he'd held in death, of honoring the debt I'd failed to pay for so long. This sword is yours by right, Freya. Your father's blood marked it. His courage blessed it. It should stay with his bloodline. He offered her the blade, and she took it with trembling hands. The weight felt right now, balanced and true. Through the metal, She swore she could feel an echo of her father's strength, his unwavering determination to protect those he loved. They stood in silence for a long moment. 3 souls connected across the barrier of death: father, daughter, and the king whose life had been purchased with sacrifice. Finally, Freya spoke the words that had been building in her chest for months. "Father, there's something else you should know. Something I need to tell you, even though you can't hear me." Killian's hand found hers, squeezing gently. He knew what she was about to say. She'd told him 3 days ago, when the healer had confirmed what she'd already suspected. "I'm carrying your grandchild," Freya whispered. "Killian's child. The heir to the throne. I'm terrified, Father. Terrified I'll make mistakes, that I won't be good enough, that I'll fail to protect them the way you always protected us. But I'm so grateful. Grateful for every lesson you taught me, every moment of love you gave. I'll tell our child about you. About the warrior who chose exile to keep his family safe, who died so others could live." Killian pulled her close, his hand resting on her still flat stomach where new life grew. "You're going to be an incredible mother," he murmured against her hair, "just as you've become an incredible queen. You honor his memory every day with your strength, your compassion, your refusal to let fear control you. I'm still scared," she admitted, "of failing you, of failing our child, of not being the queen the kingdom needs. Good. Fear keeps us careful, keeps us humble. It's when we stop being afraid that we become dangerous." His arms tightened around her. "But you're not facing this alone. We'll make mistakes together, learn together, raise our child together. That's what being mates means, sharing every burden and every joy." They stayed until the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. As they prepared to leave, Freya touched her father's gravestone one last time. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything. For the life you gave me, the lessons you taught me, the sacrifice that made all of this possible. I'll make you proud, Father. I promise." The ride back to Shadowkeep was quiet, but comfortable. Both of them lost in thought. Freya kept one hand on her stomach, marveling at the life growing there. A child who would never know its grandfather, but would carry his legacy in its blood. "What if I'm terrible at this?" she asked as the castle came into view, black towers silhouetted against the dying light. "Being a mother, I mean. What if our child needs something I can't give?" Killian reined his horse closer until their legs touched. "Then we'll figure it out together. Just as we figured out everything else. The council, the healing networks, learning to balance duty and love. We'll make mistakes, Freya. We're going to mess up repeatedly, but our child will never doubt that they're loved, that they're wanted, that they're cherished beyond measure. That's what matters." "How are you so calm about this? You're going to be a father." "I'm not calm. I'm terrified." His golden eyes found hers, vulnerable and honest. "I'm terrified I'll fail them the way I failed your father for so long. That I'll be too focused on being king to be a good father. That I'll pass down my scars and mistakes instead of wisdom. Then we'll be terrified together." She smiled through tears. "And we'll love our child fiercely enough to overcome every mistake." As they rode through Shadowkeep's gates, Freya felt the weight of her father's sword at her side, the bond with her mate singing between them, and the new life growing in her womb. She thought of Bryn training to be a warrior, of the healing network spreading across the kingdom, of all the ways her father's sacrifice had blossomed into something beautiful. The future was uncertain. There would be challenges ahead, council politics, neighboring kingdoms, the endless work of ruling. But for the first time since standing in that forest clearing surrounded by white wolves, Freya felt ready. Not because she had all the answers, but because she had Killian beside her, her father's legacy guiding her, and the strength that came from finally understanding her worth. She was Freya Stormborn, queen of the realm, mate to the Alpha King, daughter of a hero. The end